back, lads.
How are you, CJ?
Good. Here we
Hi,
are
boys.
again.
Good to see you, Mick.
Hello, guys. Hope you're all well.
We haven't had a weather update from Mick for a while. Rooster usually asks what the weather's like over there in Queensland there. Give us some good news, mate. Is it sunshine or?
Just enjoying sunny and 26 over here, boys,
shut
battling
up.
away. Yeah, the winter, 26 to 28. It's a real battle.
Sun in your plums. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Get that perineum out there.
I was waiting for that. Jonesy
Well, mate-
loves his perineum sunning.
I love everyone's perineum, mate, not just mine.
Mickey, you're asking us, you said you hope we're all well, and it's interesting because it ties into what we're talking about today, which is testing for wellness. How do we know that we're well? If you're not sure, what tests are available to you to actually measure how you're doing, like an objective measure? That's what we're going to chat about today. Because there's tons out there.
I've recently done mine, and
Yeah.
I have done it for probably 4 or 5 years.
It's well worth doing, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, not that anything comes up too often,
Yeah.
but if they do, you can grab hold of them.
It's also a bloody minefield, though.
Yeah, there's
Like I heard the other day, if you took all sorts of like pathology testing, there's 100,000 tests.
Is that right?
So which ones do you do?
Yeah.
You
Well,
know, or which ones will your doctor let you do?
yeah.
And then which ones are worthwhile listening to, what gives you valid information, and what's basically just fluff.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
so-
I went in and initially I asked, it was really based around, you can go listen to my intro on my health concern that got me to this point, but it was based around the issue that I had with the large blood vessel in my brain pushing on a nerve. And one of the things the neurologist recommended was a low inflammatory diet. So I kind of looked that up and then kind of got on this pathway. But I changed my diet and I went in and I wanted to know the kind of metrics behind it. I went in and asked the doctor, look, I've changed this. I'm on more of a paleo, which ended up being sort of more of a ketogenic diet. And that was the impetus for me to say to the doctor, I've changed my diet. I just want to look at some things. Because of this dietary change, I want to look at if there's any inflammation in my body. I want to look at white blood cells, red blood cells, fasting glucose, cholesterol was sort of the initial ones. And then as we went along, I did more research, looked into it, and just asked for a few more. So I asked for some major ones, and the doctor's pretty good. If you've got someone you've built a rapport with, he's still in the mainstream medical establishment, so is reluctant to give some that you ask. But if you go in, and I think if you have a background and you've done a little bit of research, like we all do, and you can sort of justify the reasons why you want to do those tests, you can ask for a few tests. And I've got the list here of the ones that I've asked for, and I can run through them and the reasons why. And you could probably do that yourselves if you wanted to. But yeah, there are ones that you can go to and get them for free. You know, you line up Western Diagnostic or wherever you go to get your bloods done, and they do it and they send them out to you. So if you ask for a patient copy, you can get those. You can kind of see what ranges you're in. Initially, sort of I had a low iron sort of one, but kind of worked out that was from donating blood. We can kind of talk about that a little bit later on. And ancestrally,
Iron's an interesting one, isn't it? Because low iron versus low hemoglobin. Like, I mean, if your iron's low, your ferritin is low, but you're making enough hemoglobin, it's probably key to longevity.
yeah.
You're not going to make many hydroxyl-free radicals, and if you can get by with sort of pretty lowish ferritin, but your hemoglobin's not affected, I would almost say that's probably, for longevity, that's probably optimal. So
Yeah, well, I mean, if
it's an
you look
interesting
at
one, isn't it? Your iron studies.
ancestrally, if you look at humans going way back, there would have been a fair bit of bloodletting, wouldn't there? You know,
100%, yeah.
You're scrapping with another tribe.
Yep.
You lose a bit of blood. I
Yeah.
think that having high iron levels, actually, I have a study on that. I was going to go back to that later, but actually, it was a different one. It was about iron deficiency and overload. But you know, there is evidence to say that high iron levels are a contributor to heart disease.
Oh, terrible. Yeah. If you've got, like, especially like hemochromatosis or something like that, where you have really high iron, it is so detrimental to your health.
Yep.
Like you are just generating so many free radicals, which are going to attack, all your cardiovascular system and everything like that. Really, really bad. So
Yeah.
you definitely don't want to, be supplementing with iron and have crazy high levels or anything like that.
No.
I think especially as a male,
Yeah,
Modern
males are
Ancestral Man
different, obviously.
podcast, like we obviously don't menstruate, so we're not having that regular blood loss. But there's a really good argument, like you say, to giving blood.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's really, as an ancestral man, that's
Yep.
what we can, modern ancestral man, what we
Yeah.
can do to mimic what would have happened in the past. We would have had scraps with people in our tribe. We would have had scraps
100%.
with other tribes. We would
Yep.
have had bear attacks or saber-toothed tiger attacks, or falling out of a tree or whatever it
Getting
was.
eaten by a T-Rex.
Yeah, losing blood on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Not menstruation like females do, but their iron levels are low, and
Yeah.
typically their heart disease levels are lower.
Mm.
I mean, that's
But men
Correlation.
can menstruate, can't they?
a different
Can't
topic.
they have babies as well?
They could identify as that if they wanted to, I
Okay,
guess. Yeah.
Sorry, just
Different-
sidetracked.
That's another podcast.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah.
But mate, you spoke before about your dramas with your blood vessel, and you spoke about reducing your inflammation.
Mm.
And so you've done some testing. So you would have tested for C-reactive protein, I guess, which is one of the most common measures of inflammation.
Yeah.
Is that one of the tests that you did?
Yep.
Or
So,
maybe high sensitivity CRP is probably better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I think I asked for a high sensitive CRP,
Yep.
and the doctor gave a reason why he wouldn't give me that one.
Oh, okay.
Don't know
Probably
why.
cost.
I think maybe it wasn't a free one, but yeah, I did. I got C-reactive protein, which obviously is a marker for inflammation and maybe infection in the body. Obviously, doesn't show you where, but
No.
you can work it out. And
Yes.
that was specifically one of the reasons, one of the ones I wanted to ask for by the change in that diet, because I wanted to see if the standard Australian diet of high carbohydrates, low fat, had an effect on that C-reactive protein. So did it go from being high to being low when I changed to a low carb paleo sort of diet?
Can you guys just explain for me and for other people that aren't aware what the C means in the reactive protein? What does that mean?
Oh, it's not like that. It's just a name they've given it essentially. So it's
Right,
like
so
that's
C
that's
dash.
C
reactive
reactive protein. Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yep. So CRP.
And
so
what's that responsible for? What does that do in our body?
it's just an inflammatory marker.
Right.
So essentially, like if you have, like CJ touched on, if you have an infection or if you have like a big wound or if you've had some long-term health issues, then you'll find your CRP will be quite high.
Right.
So if you had a really bad bacterial infection and you measured your CRP, it's going to be through the roof. But if you're well day to day and you're not battling any sort of infection or anything like that,
Yep.
then we want our CRP, C-reactive protein, to be quite low.
Right.
So they generally want
That's
it to
the
be
one.
less than 1. And then people in the wellness space probably talk about it being less than maybe 0.5 or 0.4.
Gotcha.
So you can go and get it measured. It's a very inexpensive blood test. And like CJ said, it's just a marker of inflammation. It doesn't give you a specific, like, your heart's inflamed or anything like that. It's just a general inflammation marker.
Yep.
But day to day, we want to run obviously uninflamed or with a very low level of inflammation.
Yep.
And so that C-reactive protein is one of the really common measures for an inflammatory marker.
It'll be high if if you've had a cold or
Exactly.
or COVID or an injury.
Be sky high if you had COVID, I reckon.
Yeah.
Spike protein kicking around in your body.
Yeah. Sorry, we can't talk about COVID, otherwise we get
No, don't censor
shut
that.
down.
Yeah.
So even I think after a really hard workout, if
Yep,
you've gone
absolutely.
hard,
Yep.
it'll go up. So if you went
Even if you've damaged part of your body, so if you've got a nasty injury or something like that, your C-reactive protein will raise a little bit.
yeah
Like you hear, you read about some people who've got like a bad infection, they'll go and measure C-reactive protein, it'll be bloody through the roof. Like you look at the reference range and they'll be right up here like crazy. But day to day, you definitely want to be less than 1 and maybe less than 0.5 would even be a better.
So that
indicator.
CRP test is not going to tell you where the inflammation
No.
is associated. It's just going to give you an indication of
Yes.
there is some inflammation.
Mhm.
yeah. But yeah, so if something's changed, like I did with the diet, you might want to go in and say, is that helping or is that hurting? Is that causing systemic inflammation throughout my body? That is one way to check on that.
Yeah, right.
Yep. So that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it is, and
Yeah.
pretty inexpensive.
Yeah.
I've gone down a different route to you, CJ, where I didn't want to go to the doctor and have to explain why I wanted all my various tests. So I've gone through an external testing agency, and I think C-reactive protein, a high sensitivity CRP, costs like $14 or something. It's very, very inexpensive.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And Smitty, can you just tell where you went through to that? Because I did research the same, and I'm a little bit like you. I don't want to go to a GP for testing, and I don't want to have to explain why. I don't want to be limited to what I can get tested. I just went onto a website called i-screen.
Yeah, yeah.
.com.au. It's an Australian website. And if anyone wanted to go onto that website, and so I'll get you to tell me where you went for yours, but this website has got an absolute plethora of different variety of tests you can do. Mm-hmm. And the first one that I went on to was called the Well Man Check. It's $250, but within that $250, you got just a multitude of tests to test for a whole lot of different things.
Run through a few.
Hormone profile for testosterone, free testosterone, a full blood count, red blood cells, hemoglobin, white blood cells, platelets, and more. Cholesterol, total LDLs, HDLs, blood glucose, bone health, calcium, vitamin D, phosphate, magnesium, kidney function, liver function, markers to indicate damage, inflammation, iron stores, and that was just some of them. That were listed.
Yep. So
there's 42 tests all up in that $250.
That's really interesting because every one of those is on my list that I got for free.
Okay.
But I mean, you pay $80 to go to the doctor, or you could get bulk billed, whatever it is. Yep. But yeah, so I got sort of uric acid, which is a kidney function one. There was also phosphate, which is kidney function test. Calcium, iron, androgen, so testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin, which controls how much of the sex or hormones are delivered to tissues and whatnot. Lipids, thyroid function, 25 hydroxy vitamin D. I might throw that over to Smithy in a minute. Sort of routine hematology, liver function tests, which did sort of bilirubin, albumin, protein, globulin gap, fasting glucose. I also got electrolytes, so I asked I want to see my sodium levels. I want to make sure that they're topped off.
Yeah, sodium, potassium are pretty.
Yeah, so that come under kidney function test sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so, mate, did you list those things yourself, or did they just come? Did you just have a few that you wanted, and the rest of them come under that banner of that certain blood test that you did? Just so for, I'm just thinking of the normal punter going to his GP.
Yeah.
Does he just say, what does he say? You
can say, I'd like to see how my thyroid's working. I'd like to see if there's issues with my thyroid, kidney, liver, testosterone. They might be a bit funny about that one. They'll probably ask, how's your sex drive? Are you getting erections? Are you having trouble conceiving a child? Something along those lines. And if you said, yes, I'm having trouble with one of those, they'd throw that in there. Because I went to a separate doctor because I wanted to get these tests, and I think I mentioned it on a previous podcast when I said they didn't want to put testosterone on there, and I said, why? They said, well, what if we find that it's low? I said, well, we'll deal with that when we get it. But so I didn't really have a reason why. I wasn't trying to conceive a kid, or I wasn't. Anyway, you could throw that in there. But the other one's sort of kidney function as well. I think you could go in and ask for these quite easily and just say, I want to see how these are working. I want to get a baseline figure for moving into the future. We're all kind of in our 40s or pushing our 40s, or maybe Mick's only mid-30s or something. I don't know. Getting there. But we're all getting to sort of an age where we want to maybe have a baseline of health or an idea of baseline health. And so that if there's any differentiation in the future, you can rectify it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
You don't want to have a blood test now and then have another one in 10 years and not have the data in between. I'm more of a data dude.
Yep.
I like to have some numbers. Some of these are not probably ideal for all things, right? But it gives you an idea. Gives you a bit of a baseline.
I guess an average punter could maybe go onto that website, or one that I'm going to ask Smitty that he's had a look at, that iscreen.com.au, and just get a have a look at the list of tests that are available and then just write the ones down that he wants and then take it to a GP and say, look, I want these tested. At least he's got some indication or some idea about the things that are available to be tested instead of paying the $250.
I mean, like we talked about in our sleep episode, how much is your health worth?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, spend a few $100 if you need to.
You want to prioritize your health and make sure that everything's all right. So $250, that's nothing really to check on your health.
Yeah.
A little, what do they call it? Men's wellness panel is probably a great idea.
Check,
But if you wanted to do it on the cheap, you can do it sort of through your GP.
Yeah.
But there's definitely other ones, you know, you could quantify just about anything, you know. You could get there's $400 small intestinal bacterial overgrowth kind of test.
I've done one of those.
Have you? The breath one?
No, actually a fecal sample.
Oh, yeah.
So send a bit of your poop off in a little test tube thing.
Did you get it in
Put it back in the mail, which seems fucking wrong, but
crazy.
I got a
send
funny
some
story
poo in the mail off to someone to have a look at, and they
in the express post box.
give you all the various breakdown of all your different microorganisms living in your gut. It's very valuable to do.
You found that valuable? Sorry, we'll get to you in a second.
Yep. I did, I think it's worthwhile. Yeah.
Did it give you any recommendations on the top of that? Because this is one of the things we're doing for our kids.
So I, like many people at the time, didn't have as good a diet as what I think I do now. And I had some candida overgrowth, which is extremely common.
Yeah.
A lot of people have candida overgrowth.
What did they do to rectify that, or did?
They recommended some probiotics to try and crowd out the candida.
Yep.
Candida is a fungus. You can also take an antifungal. So if you want to do like the sledgehammer effect, people can take like a diflucan or something like that, which can kill it. I actually used a homeopathic remedy for it, which I think actually worked extremely well.
Yep.
And then essentially to get rid of candida, you want to lower your sugar, so it's dietary. So you just want to eat more paleo, keto.
Kids aren't going to be happy with eating less sugar, that's for sure.
You want to eat a lot of sugar and you got candida, you're not going to get rid of it. And it's really hard to get rid of. Everyone will probably have some level of candida, but you want to definitely keep it under control. You can crowd it out with other probiotics and things like that as well.
Yeah,
it's a whole thing. But one of the biggest problems that I think people come across with testing is that it opens up too many rabbit holes. It gets too confusing, and people just go away from it.
That's a huge possibility.
As I touched on before, there's 100,000 tests that you can do.
Yep.
What the fuck does it all mean?
Yeah.
And how do we integrate it in a meaningful way?
Yeah.
And what are the most beneficial tests that we can do, the best bang for your buck, that are sort of scientifically proven, that are going to get us some tangible results?
Yeah.
Because you can go around in circles, and you could order 50 tests, and you're going to come away so fucking confused.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to get a recommendation that you need to take 80 different supplements, and it's all going to get too hard.
Yep.
You're going to throw your hands up in the air and say, fuck this, I'm not doing too bad, I'm done.
Yep.
So I think for testing, the most important thing is choose like 5 or 6 really pertinent tests and then just stick with that. So, for me, like, what are the important ones? Yep. I think you want to measure your inflammation. We already spoke about that in terms of your C-reactive protein. I think you want to talk about how you're doing with your lipids, and I've got a different take on this.
Sorry, I didn't mention lipids, but that was one I got.
So,
free.
Obviously any doctor will write you a test for cholesterol.
Yep.
If your cholesterol's bad, they're probably going to recommend statins. Now, there's tons of differing opinions out there on, the role of cholesterol and how bad cholesterol is if you have your high, your bad cholesterol, which is your low density lipoprotein, LDL. If that's high, is it bad? Well, people have a lot of different takes on that, but I think a more valuable one is to measure omega-3, omega-6 ratio. So omega-6, it's in a lot of our seed oils. It's incredibly pro-inflammatory, and it's probably one of the worst things you can put in your mouth. It's pretty much in all processed foods because it's an inexpensive seed oil. And if you eat food, even good food, you get enough omega-6.
Yes.
But the problem is it's really hard to keep our omega-3 high enough to have a healthy ratio of omega-3 to omega-6.
Yeah, right.
So you can get it tested. You can send away and get omega-3, omega-6 ratio test. And I think it's incredibly valuable. It's going to indirectly measure your inflammation as well, because if your omega-6 is too high, then you're definitely inflamed. But you also want your omega-3 to be high for heart health, for brain health, because omega-3 is like your EPAs, your DHAs, DHA sort of brain, EPA sort of blood vessels, and they both have crossover with each other. But especially in the modern world, if you're eating any level of processed food, if you're having any level of seed oil, I think it's really valuable to measure omega-3, omega-6, and I think it's really good information about maybe how much omega-3 you want to supplement with.
What's the ratio, sorry, Smithy?
So I think you want it to be 8, ideally.
8 to 1?
Yeah.
8 omega-6 to 1 omega-3.
Yeah, it could be vice versa.
Yeah.
The test spells it out very clearly, but most people will be terrible.
Yeah,
like you might be like 1 to 1 or something like that.
Yeah.
You don't want to be that.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
And mate, that's such a critical point that you say that, because not many people would know about getting their omega-3 and 6s tested.
Yeah.
I know people that are like our age, fully fit and active, that get tested for their cholesterol and they come back a high cholesterol level. They're freaking out.
And they go on statin drugs.
Then they go on a drug which has other side effects, like with testosterone and blah, blah, blah. We can go down that rabbit hole. But it just seems to me that there's this, I don't know, this sort of trap in the medical profession of just getting someone's cholesterol high, but they might be a fit, as long as they're not massively overweight or diabetic and they're active. I can't see the problem with having a high cholesterol count.
Yeah, well, you can go down the rabbit hole of that, and there's further testing you can do. If you want to look at cholesterol and you want to go down that, well, then you can get a lipid subfraction test. So you can look at the particles, small dense particles, or the large buoyant particles. So you can look at the sort of breakdown of your lipids, and then it might not be too bad from there. But that test costs several $100s to do, and you can get it through I think iScreen do it. I use a company called iMedical.
Okay.
Another sort of Australian company. I looked at both iScreen and iMedical, and I basically just shop around for the best price.
Yeah, right. Okay.
In iMedical, you can do it's called a build your own panel.
That's right.
So you click on the little button that says build your own test.
Yep.
And I think that costs you $19, which covers basically the blood draw. The amount you got to pay the pathologist to take your blood, and then you can there's a big drop down box, and you can just pick any test you want.
Yep.
And you can go and you can measure your lipid subfractions if you want. You can look at the breakdown of small dense versus large buoyant particles and things like that.
So that's LDLP, it's called? Particle size? LDL particle size? LDLP?
Yeah, I think in the iMedical website, it's broken down by like A to B, C to D. So there's all these drop down boxes. So it depends on what the first letter of the thing is. So I think for that one, it would be under the L, under lipids, and then I think it would be like lipid particle subfraction or something like that.
Gotcha.
So I think that's much more valuable than just general cholesterol.
Yeah.
Then I think, you could also do your omega ratios and.
I think we'll deep dive into cholesterol.
I think we'll do a whole one on that, but
crazy, yeah. And
well,
definitely,
as you've mentioned in previous podcasts, mate, cholesterol is an essential nutrient to our body, isn't it? And
we make 80% of it in our liver.
Have a brain.
Yeah.
You die with that cholesterol.
It's made of cholesterol,
and it goes up as you get older, and that's an evolutionary trait to protect your brain.
Is it protective? Yeah, exactly right.
That's what
all our cell membranes are made of cholesterol.
Yeah.
And
so it's incredibly important to have enough cholesterol.
That just blows me away then. So as a man gets older, or people get older in our society, they're given all these these high cholesterol pills. Does that then affect their whole, we're talking about dementia, like Parkinson's, all these brain conditions? Is this a flow-on effect of all this medication we're given to something that should be occurring naturally? Yeah. It's crazy.
It's very controversial. Let's be very clear. This is not medical advice, what we're talking about here. This is strictly like our opinion on things.
Definitely.
And there are a lot of opinions on this.
Yeah.
You've got your sort of conventional medical opinions on this, and everything on both sides of it.
You were talking before, Rooster, about youngish, I'm saying we're 40, young, fit people with high cholesterol. So there's a bloke called David Feldman who has done a lot of research on this. He's got a website called The Cholesterol Code, and you can go on there, and he's got a term called lean mass hyperresponders, who are young, fit people who have a good diet of sort of a keto, paleo sort of diet. They have a call it hyperresponder, or their lipids go up. We'll deep dive on it, but that's a really good website to check out, Cholesterol Code.
Yeah.
And he's got a little calculator on there based on age, weight, cholesterol numbers, and he gives out a little guide on whether you should be concerned or not.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one to check out if you've got anyone that's sort of going to the doctor, which my lipid levels are quite high. So I found this website, The Cholesterol Code, David Feldman. He's a professor at somewhere. Really quite helpful. He's been on a few podcasts. You can check him out.
Yeah, I'll have a look at that one.
Ivor Cummins is another good one. He breaks it down pretty well. He's an engineer, but he talks about cholesterol pretty well.
Such a controversial area.
Yeah,
you're going to rattle off 5 of the most important tests that you said. You've mentioned 2, the CRP.
Yeah, mate. I mean, you definitely want to know what your blood sugar is doing. So, you can go and get a spot glucose check. Yeah. You can get fasting glucose. Meh. I reckon HbA1c, so hemoglobin A1c, sort of measures the average saturation. Measures your average blood sugar over a range of, I think it's like 40...
3 months?
40 odd days, maybe 3 months. It's long-term average blood glucose.
That one you might have to get through one of your eye screens or your eye medicals, because when I asked the doctor, he said no.
Yeah, a lot of doctors will write your HbA1c because it is getting sort of more common, and it's incredibly useful. But really, you want your HbA1c, I would say, to be less than 5. You don't want your average blood glucose to be more than 5. Yeah. And there's good data to suggest if you're below that in terms of like a, predictive biomarker for longevity and wellness, HbA1c below 5. Yeah. So you can get that in conjunction with fasting glucose and fasting insulin if you want to get the whole picture. But if you're trying to be frugal, if you're paying for this yourself, just get HbA1c, go from there.
And fasting glucose is a good one, I guess, to determine if you've got any metabolic symptoms, diabetes and whatnot. But that's one that I kind of think is that a great one, because it's telling me what my glucose is at a normal level when I'm sitting there doing nothing. Don't I want it? Don't I want to know what it is after I've eaten a high sugar meal and how quickly it comes back down?
Yeah, I mean, you can get a glucose tolerance test.
Yeah,
it's again this rabbit hole of testing. I think fasting insulin is incredibly useful, because maybe your fasting glucose is really good, but maybe that's because your fasting insulin is higher than it needs to be to control that glucose.
Yeah.
So that's showing, okay, we're starting to get some derailment here.
Yeah.
But so I think definitely you want to know where your blood sugar is at, because it really is a very valuable predictive marker for wellness and longevity. Yep. And it's cheap.
Yep.
HbA1c doesn't cost much. Again, you can write it off, I assume, my screen. Definitely iMedical, because I've done it.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yep.
Any others that you'd...
Vitamin D?
Vitamin D,
25 hydroxy, or is it the other one?
25 OH. You can get 125 as well. Just get your standard vitamin D test. 25 hydroxy.
Go back and listen to our vitamin D sun exposure podcast.
Yeah. Hydroxy. I mean, look, if you want to avoid, getting cancer, if you want all the wellness that's associated with having high vitamin D, then just go and get your range tested in Australia. We're in, what do we use over here? We use nanomoles per milliliter. In the US, they use nanograms per milliliter. But basically, in Australia, I think you probably want your range to be somewhere in between like 100 and 200. If you want to get in that highest sort of quartile for us, I reckon 150 to 200 is a really good level. It's a high level, but I think the science supports you can go that high.
Yeah, it's higher than the recommended normal person.
So our reference range in Australia, I think, is 50 to 125. But there's tons of science to support between 100 and 200 if you want that really optimal wellness, really reducing your risk of cancer and all the other beneficial effects that we really dove into in our vitamin D podcast, which you can go check out.
Yeah.
Again, inexpensive.
I think that's a really good point, Matty, because with a lot of these blood markers and the reference intervals that are actually stipulated by general practitioners, if you were to go and visit, say, a naturopathic practitioner, quite often they would actually recommend a reference range significantly higher for a lot of these readings.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, do you want to be normal, or do you want to be on the high end? You know? Do you want to be in a reference range that's on the low side?
Yeah.
I'm cool. I'm 30. My iron count is 31. The reference range is between 30 and 100 or whatever it is. I'm 31. I'm in that reference range. That's cool. But what if I'm 29? You know, that
it's a fucking joke.
Yeah.
Like you can go to the doctor and your reference range for glucose, you know, you might just do like your fasting glucose. You might be like 0.1 below the cutoff range for being pre-diabetic.
So you're good.
So you're sweet. You're all good. Come back in a year, you're fine. Well, it's like, well, you're not good. It's showing a pattern here. But and I think Mickey touched on a really good point, which is a lot of these reference ranges are for the avoidance of disease. They're not for wellness.
Yeah, right.
I think another really important one from the perspective of measuring health, guys, is vitamin B, particularly vitamin B12 and the active B12 in the body. This is one that I think you could say forensically kept an eye on with our family post sort of wifey being diagnosed and us transferring over to a plant-based nutrition or diet. And I think, interestingly, again, what we were just discussing there in terms of these reference ranges stipulated by a GP comparatively to a naturopath, I know that vitamin B12 and the acceptable range, say from a GP, is significantly lower by up to 4 times when compared with what a naturopath might recommend. So I think vitamin B12 is another one, you know, when your vitamin B12 stores are low, as I have had before, it's something that can really impact your day-to-day wellness and your overall health.
It's because you're a vegan, mate. No, just kidding. That was awkward.
Or am I?
So would that be one you'd recommend as well, boys?
Yeah, I'd build on that as well and sort of tie in with the whole vitamin B stores thing and just touch on homocysteine. So homocysteine is another cheap test. Homocysteine is an excellent predictor of sort of cardiovascular mortality and stuff like that. It's essentially looking at more like your methylation status. So if you're not methylating well, you're probably going to have high homocysteine. And it really is a really good indicator for long-term health, homocysteine. It's an inexpensive test. And I would say get that measured and you want to make sure that is not high. If you've got high homocysteine, you are absolutely going to have like a poor cardiovascular outcome. There's decades of science behind that. It's one of the most researched.
So that's a cardiovascular test, is it?
No, it's not a cardiovascular test, but homocysteine indirectly is going to measure like how well you are methylating, so how well you're adding methyl groups onto things. A lot of people are under-methylators or over-methylators. You can get tested for it. It's like a genetic thing.
What's a methylator? What does that mean?
So if you add a methyl group to something, it makes it more soluble. So inside your cell, if you're instructing something, you want to make something in your cell, but then you want to move it outside of your cell. You want to make collagen, you want to make something. You want to add methyl groups to it to make it more soluble. Mm. So basically, methylation is a whole thing. We could do a podcast just on that because methylation's kind of in fashion, or it was a couple of years ago. And it's really also looks at sort of how well you're producing energy and ties in with vitamin B and stuff like that. But I think homocysteine is a really valuable marker that you can test. It's reasonably inexpensive and it absolutely ties in with sort of long-term cardiovascular outcomes. You've got high homocysteine, you're in trouble.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Learning so much here.
So I just reckon it's a cheap and valuable test to do. I always get homocysteine tested.
And is there, like, taking these results, once you've got your results, would you recommend going to a naturopath with these results?
Yeah, a functional medicine doctor.
Depends on the naturopath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
or a mainstream.
Or do some of your own research to find out, you know, how can I increase my testosterone? How can I reduce my blood glucose? Whatever.
Depends on your personal beliefs.
Yeah.
If you believe in staunch mainstream medicine, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Then go and see your your staunch mainstream GP.
Yep.
If you feel more comfortable with a naturopath. There's lots of different takes on all this stuff. Like some of it is reasonably, I think no one would say it's really healthy to have really high homocysteine. I think no one would say, it's really healthy to have really high CRP. But then how you interpret it and what you're going to do with it is going to vary dramatically depending on what sort of route you go down. You're going to go down like a natural health sort of alternative type thing, or you're going to really just stick to that sort of mainstream pharmaceutical medicine. So, some people want to go on statins, right? Like some people will go to the doctor will say, hey, you're 50, let's test your cholesterol. oh, your cholesterol's sky high, let's go on statins, and they'll be very happy with that. So if that suits you, then do that. But if not, maybe go to a naturopath or a functional medicine doctor. I've been to a really good conventional doctor, but specialised in functional medicine. I had a way different take on everything. He was fantastic, really, really good.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Or even take some responsibility yourself, Matty. I think a really important point here for everyone, and we'll say this continually, which is why we bring things up repeatedly on the podcast that are things people can do for themselves. But no one will give a fuck about your health more than yourself.
Absolutely.
So whilst these reference ranges and these tests, Matty's given some really specific ones there that are very, very handy to give an indication of health and longevity. But it doesn't take much to go and research these things and implement a few simple changes to make improvements, and no one will give a fuck more than yourself. So
100%.
Take some responsibility.
Yep. And I'll just close on, it's the end of winter. It's a really good time for your vitamin D level as well, because we haven't had, obviously, a lot of sunlight in the southern hemisphere over winter. So if you get your D tested at the moment and it's pretty good, then you're probably good for at least another year, because we've got the summer coming up.
Yeah.
Cool.
And if you're in the northern hemisphere, disregard.
Yeah. Well, few good bits of information there. Looks like, Roosty, you were taking some notes. And
yeah, I've learned a lot out of this.
Very good.
I wasn't really up to speed with all of the testing, and I was very new to it. So thanks very much for the info, and I'll definitely take on board those 4 first ones that we mentioned there at least.
Yep.
I'll probably go into iMedical and just tick those boxes and just make my own. Yeah.
And I think if anyone's got any more questions, flick us an email.
Yeah.
We'd like to hear from you. modernancestralman.com. No, it's at Gmail. Let me start again. It's just modernancestralman@gmail.com.
Right on.
There we go.
Good stuff.
See you boys next week.
Have a good week.
Cheers, lads. Catch up.
Good on you. Bye-bye.
Take care, boys. Bye.